So, good morning. My name's Andrew Prugg. I'm the Managing Director for Policy at the We Mean Business Coalition. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this event this morning, this breakfast dialogue organized by the World Benchmarking Alliance and the We Mean Business Coalition. It's terrific to see so many people here at this time of the day. And this being Davos, there's probably at least 5 things you could be doing, even at this hour, and only one of those is sleeping. So thank you for making it out here. I think with the events of the announcement by President Trump yesterday of the US exiting the Paris Agreement, and business leadership is more important than ever, so it's terrific to see so many people in the room, and we're looking forward to a frank discussion with you all and your inputs on what business expects and needs to see from policy. Just 3 quick points of housekeeping. One is the exit and the toilets just out on this side here. Second one is that there are some journalists in the room who will be listening and would welcome exchanges one-to-one with any of you at the end. So if you'd like to do that, please do let us know. And third point is that we will organize this as a, very much a roundtable discussion. So speakers will speak from the floor and feel free to raise your hand when the time comes to intervene. So with that very short introduction, it's my great pleasure to hand over to my boss, the CEO of the We Mean Business Coalition, Maria Mendelus. So Maria, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for waking up so early and for prioritizing this meeting. So it's my pleasure to be here with Gerbrand, but also with our coalition partner, Aaron, Peter, Lindsay, and also Marina from CBDS Brazil, and Leah, yes, who has gone to another table, but she's still with us. I'm kidding. So thank you so much. Obviously, everybody has in their mind the announcement yesterday. But I have to say that, as I have written recently, that there is a lot of noise, but I find that the market fundamentals still stand. And lately, I'm looking for many positive stories, even yesterday here at COP. I think the first one is that the energy transition is going ahead. And yesterday, I read that this is the first year is the cleanest power. The British are getting the cleanest power this year. The Spanish did it a while ago as well. And so I think I see, in that side, we see a lot of records every day with the uptake of renewables. China has made it to the first automotive manufacturer in the world by being quite strong and fixed into electric vehicles and hybrids. And that's what is causing more disruption rather than anything else, as they are not importing as many cars and as they are going big on electric, and that's having consequences around the world in terms of the accessibility to those cars and the acceleration of that transition. And we know that heat heat is the next one. So I think there are very positive market signals that are leading in that direction. Yesterday, I had the pleasure to spend some time with Monica from Yara. She was here with Sven, the CEO, and she was very excited talking to me about fertilizers and the fact that they have a partnership with PepsiCo that are going to sell chips that are using zero emissions fertilizers. And she also was talking to me about the challenges of the geopolitics. And the fact that Russia is not maybe exporting gas, but is exporting big-time fertilizers, which is a big issue for them. But I could see when she was speaking how her eyes were shining when she was talking about the progress, and the fact that she was meeting with 8 companies from the food industry that want to go all in on clean fertilizer. And then I had the pleasure of riding also with the CEO of Heidelberg Materials, Dominic. And yes, he said it's very difficult, and it's going to be very difficult. But the moment where his eyes were shining, it's kind of interesting. Maybe, Peter, you would appreciate that, is when he showed me the dashboard where he had mapped all the sales of cement, zero-emission cement, different kind of zero-emission cement across the world. And he says, yes, the omnibus is very important. For us, it's been a massive effort to understand all the numbers, but now I can check and I can track and I can tell my country managers that they're not doing enough. So yes, we're going to hear, as you say, the doom, yeah. But I find that once the dust settles, I think we just need to move on and change this narrative, because There's much more positives, as I see at the moment, not being naive about the difficulty of the moments and the difficulty of the geopolitics. So it is sad to see, that the main risk for businesses these days are the geopolitics. And so that's probably the first thing that we will hear from you, that we will ask government, is that coherence. And also, we also need more innovation in Europe. And with Lindsay, with CSL and our partners will be working on this, because we need to scale the procurement of low carbon products by starting to ask consumers to buy certain thresholds of low carbon solution. We have Faustine from MPP. I'm sure she'll talk about this. There's no time to waste. And so in many senses. So I'm going to pass over to Gerbrand. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And my name is Gerbrand. I'm the Executive Director of the World Benchmarking Alliance. And maybe to start off where Maria is, I don't know if Rio Tinto is in the room, but they are together, just to stay in that sort of positive science, they're opening up the biggest iron ore mine in Guinea together with their Chinese counterpart, because a very high grade of iron ore that is needed to make green steel. And these are some of the investors, some of the investments that are being made that will have to last decades. And in that sense, I'm comfortable, like Maria, that a lot of the business fundamentals are there. But when we hope to be back here next year, we'll be back with an assessment of the 2,000 most influential companies and their transition plans. Because that's ultimately what we need to understand. Are companies making this transition? And when we've been looking at the plans and the assessments of companies so far on climate, but on many other issues, I think we have to sort of observe something and conclude something together, that there are leaders in every sector and in every geographic, and they give us a story and the optimism to continue. But if we look a little bit deeper, then we see that that industries as a whole are not transforming, right? So what we're seeing, if I talk to business leaders that are on the top of our ranking, they like being on the top of the ranking, but they're getting more and more frustrated with the fact that being on top of the ranking doesn't pay as much as it costs to be at the bottom of the ranking, right? So we have this problem that lagging, that the fundamentals for the energy transition are right, but they're also right for oil and gas. Sort of, if I put this in very simple terms. So if we want to change this equation, so we're talking to you're some of the world's most powerful companies, but you can't escape market forces. So if and the market forces are to a large extent shaped by what investors want and what clients want. And if we're looking at where the world is heading and where companies are, we need to understand that there's going to be a huge role for governments to be played, whether it's, as Maria said, whether it's in sort of practical things like public procurement, other forms of policy, but also regulation. Because without regulation, we can't change this square that we're in as industries. And I think if we're coming to the issue of courage, and we're going to need a lot of courage in this time of political, it's also going to be this need for some of the world's most influential companies to say that you cannot do this alone, because that's what we're seeing. And you're going to need to be very, very specific about what it is that you're going to need from governments. And this is not the ideal time to ask for it. I know that. I really understand that. But if we keep believing in this mantra that business is going to sort of bootstrap itself out of this and make the transition on its own, then we have bad news. It's not going to happen. If we're looking at the automotive industry, which is on one side, it's something to be optimistic about, because the sales of electric cars are doubling. But if we're looking 10 years ahead, because that's when the last combustion engine needs to be sold in 2035, if we're now looking at the transition plans of these automotive companies, we're not going to get beyond 40%, right? Which means that 60% of cars sold in 2035, as it stands, will still be combustion engines. And if we want the automotive industry, as an example, to make that change, it's going to need regulators, it's going to need policymakers, and we're going to need automotive companies being brave and courageous and asking for it, and not taking the opportunity of whatever political wind is there to undermine progress on that front. And I think that's one of the hard truths that we have to confront. And I'm very, very pleased that we're here together to have that conversation, to see how we can do that in this political landscape, because it's challenging, it's very hard. I'm not pretending anything of this is easy. So I'm very grateful that you're joining us today to have that conversation together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gebran. Great. So now we're going to hear from Brazil, and we have a video message coming up. But first, I'd love to pass to Marina Grossi, who's the CEO of the SEBEDES, the Brazilian Sustainable Business Association. So Marina, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you all to being here. We know that Brazil has a really important job to play this year. We are really aware. We are the Brazilian Business Council. We have more than 120 big companies. It's around 50% of the GDP. And we know that, and that's an amazing situation, because we have in Brazil also the government supporting the sustainability agenda in a very a strong way. And that's why we made a partnership with the Women Business Coalition, with the World Business Council, to see how can we really build consensus and have impact globally. And we started this since Dubai, so it's a long journey. And we also doing this with the government. We in New York we had the investable NDC, so that was something that we tropicalized from what the Women Business did. That was a signature from a lot of big companies, but also the support of the government that needs this support. And what you're going to hear now is the Anatona Records. She's the Secretary of Climate Change. We have two important voices in Brazil, one from the International Affairs and one from the Minister of Environmental. Probably it will be announced today, the president of the COP, and probably it will be André Correia do Lago. He's already doing this job, and that's the point. It's not that we are waiting for the presidents of the COP, we are already doing this, and he's doing it with us. And so it's not that it's stopping, but of course we need his guidance in a very more strong way. But well, we're going to hear Anatoni. Unfortunately, the Brazilian federal government it's still coming, and she just recorded a message for us. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Marina. So let's move to the video, please. The moment of truth. Is it going to work? Well, I'm not equipped to do the voiceover.
Any lip readers?
She looks happy though. Yeah.
Do we have any lip readers? They could. Well, let's give it a moment to.
Amazing. That happened yesterday as well, right? The music didn't want to start in the inauguration.
Oh, is that right?
Carrie Underwood or something.
Yeah.
She was supposed to sing a song, and for 2 minutes they couldn't get the sound out. Right? So then she just sang without music in the middle of the inauguration. It happened. Somebody got slapped.
Least of our
And
problems.
that's in Davos. And that's in Davos.
Least of our problems. Did you get to watch it? I didn't. I have only read.
Snippet. It was ridiculous. Did you see Elon Musk afterwards in a rally?
With the salute.
Nazi salute. He's
Yeah,
gone
that was
out of his
that
mind.
was-
You know, the guy's.
Way too much cloning.
Sure, yeah.
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 Elevated with microdosing. Good. Well, I'll get a bit of breakfast.
Right, we'll just give it a few more seconds, otherwise we'll move on with our agenda and then come back to the video afterwards.
We're in it then. What can you expect?
We're in the garage.
Garage, yeah?
Top of a garage.
We're not outside even.
How it looks like in real life. Hi. Is it the first time you come and see?
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, your first time going?
It is. I was on the doubles. But no, my first.
We also pulled
last chance, and then. Yeah. Okay. I know.
They will also defund the UN.
Right.
You want to save 2 trillion, and I would start there.
So what we're going to do is, while we're fixing the audio, we're actually going to jump ahead with our agenda and then come back and hopefully hear from Anatoni afterwards. So my pleasure to pass next to Lindsay Hooper, who is the CEO of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, who, through their corporate leaders groups, is a core partner of the Women Business Coalition. So Lindsay, I'm afraid we have to jump to you without the benefit of having heard from Anatoni. So the microphone, we'll take this one.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Good morning. We've just heard a very compelling case for why we need effective state action, effectively to change the rules of the game so that we can drive progress through markets. And without that, it will be, I think, impossible to really deliver change at the scale we need to see. And we know, as we've just heard, and we're acutely aware, we're seeing very effective resistance and pushback on that necessary ambition for a whole range of reasons, and concerning that we're hearing a level of defeatism or, it's impossible, we must focus only on adaptation at this point. I don't believe that that is what we, at this point, need to do. I think there is still everything to play for. But it won't happen unless businesses speak up and make clear that it's in their own interests, that state action is a necessary enabler of competitiveness, of security, of energy independence, of economic opportunity. So what's needed right now? Obviously, an acknowledgement of the relevance and the significance of political and geopolitical imperatives. We need narratives and strategies that engage with those realities. We need language that speaks to competitiveness and security. We need to demonstrate that it's possible. We need to counter narratives that it's simply impossible. And it is absolutely possible. We need all of those pilots, all of those innovations to be really effectively communicated to demonstrate not only to politicians, but also to society that this is possible so that we can secure the political ambition for action with strong public support. But we also, of course, need really effective business engagement in smart implementation to make sure that what we get are clear, consistent, and joined up directions and incentives for action. So we don't simply get the disclosure burden without addressing the need for the pricing. So that relevance, the narratives, the smart implementation. We also need to address the fragmentation challenge. Those resisting change are very well funded, very well organized. We need much greater action around addressing the fragmentation issue and to bring together real economy actors as well as investors so they're not played off against each other, to make sure that we do have financial markets and those representing real economy markets in the room. Specifically in the EU, we know that there's real pushback around the omnibus, a push to roll back fully any requirements there. We know that the Commission is actively keen to hear from businesses who are supporting, yes, a simplification, yes, making it really effective and smart implementation, but that actually we need to build momentum rather than pulling back. So there's a real desire to hear from businesses, and particularly those who are going to be most effective. And we know there are a range of closed-door meetings there, and really keen that those businesses that really see the importance and value of action are part of those meetings. We know that that will also need a broader base of support more widely, and need to think about how we build that broader base beyond the small number of leading businesses, or in some ways the usual suspects. How do we get that broader base of support? And that broader base speaking with really clear and consistent voices, and a willingness to work with policymakers to ensure that implementation is smooth and isn't simply a burden, but really is an enabler of European competitiveness and competitiveness for businesses within the EU. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Lindsay. important messages there around the innovation and the implementation side and the importance of getting that across to government. So I'm hearing that the video is likely to work. So let's give it another try.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very, very sorry not to be able to be there with you all, but I'm glad that Maria invited me to record this short message. Let me first thank the Women Business Coalition that has been doing a tremendous good work for climate, as well as the World Benchmarking Alliance. So we're very much looking forward to having all of you joining the Brazilian presidency to the preparation for COP30 that will happen in Belém in November. There has been asked, and Maria sent me the question about what are the priorities of the Brazilian government for the upcoming COP. Obviously, first, what we are doing is listening to people, and that's the importance of the event that you're having. We need to engage with others and understand the expectations of the private sector, civil society, subnational governments, and obviously other governments. So we have been going around and trying to listen to people and understand their expectations. Some things are already set. It must happen at COP30. One of the issues that has been followed up from the meeting in COP29 is obviously the roadmap for 1.3 trillion. That will be an important issue for us, and is legally we must start that mobilization. The second issue that has already been scheduled to happen at COP30 is the finalization of the adaptation indicators, which will be obviously very important, as well as starting the implementation of the carbon market, Article 6, that has been agreed at the last COP. So there are several smaller, so to say, topics also on the negotiation. But I think it's really important to remind ourselves that this will be the first COP after we all know that we have already past 1.5. Last year was the first year that we passed that threshold that's so important for all of us, and we'll have a COP when that knowledge about we have passed that threshold has happened. So we needed also to look, and also we'll have a COP in the Amazon, which is one of the tipping points of climate change. So what that takes us, we have spent the first decade of the Paris Agreement, setting rules, closing the rule book, making promises, pledges, and obviously having some of the goals in our NDCs. I think COP30 is important to set the agenda for the future COPs, for the next decade. And what I see happening is that we must reorientate COPs, no longer for promises, but now for practice. So we needed to focus on implementation. What are the key instruments for implementation that we needed to bring, obviously starting in COP30, but going forward. And for that, we have the global stocktake, that has just happened in COP28 that gave us the way, what we have to do. It says in paragraph 28 on energy about tripling renewables, doubling energy efficiency, transitioning away from fossil fuel. In paragraph 33 already tells us we have to stop deforestation, we have to invest in reforestation. So now it's no longer time to set new goals. What we need is implementation, and we will make, as the Brazilian presidency, our utmost effort to reorientate the COP towards implementation, and we count very, very much with the private sector to do so. Private sectors are doers. If we make of this COP a turning point COP to implementation, that means that private sector must be in the middle, in the center of it, as well as the subnational governments and others. And what can the private sector do? First, I think it's time. We have had so many bad news. The geopolitics is so hard, but we know we are on the way towards decarbonization. When we start the Paris Agreement, we were all aiming on business as usual, up to 5 degrees up by the end of the century. Now, past 10 years, we on the verge of getting to 2.7, 2.5, with all the effort that was made in the last decade. For this new decade, our task is to get from 2.5, 2.7 to 1.5. And we can only do that by implementing, because it's implementation that will bring new ambition. So private sector would be key by showing what you are already doing, showing the solutions that are already in place, that can be accelerated, that can be scaled. And we need to answer the question, if we have the technologies, if we are decarbonizing, why can't we go faster? Why can't we have more scale? What is stopping the private sector to be faster in that implementation? If we know what are the bottlenecks, we will be able, as governments, to help to accelerate that process. So I think that's the role of the private sector. First, to show that we are ready on the way, that we do have solutions. As much solutions that you can bring would be great, but we also need to look at what are the bottlenecks that's not allowing you to go faster and to go bigger. I think that's the role of the private sector, working together with the governments, obviously with the presidency, for us to be very concrete on what we needed to do to speed up implementation and to speed up the acceleration of the actions that have already started. So I'm very, very much looking forward working with all of you, with the Brazilian government. We're working very close here with Marina Grossi, Sebedis, and the whole business community. And obviously now with Maria in the women business. So please join the Brazilian presidency and help us to be as concrete and focused as possible, because this needs to be the decade of implementation and acceleration of actions. Thank you so much. I wish you all a very good meeting, and I'm very much looking forward hearing from you what you feel that the focus and the priorities of COP30 should be as well. Thank you.
Great. Well, that was an excellent message from Anna. I'm really glad we got it to work. I mean, she gave us very clearly what only can we expect from the COP30 presidency, but also what the COP30 presidency expects from business. And we heard her loud and clear. You know, why can't we go faster? Why can't we get scale? What are the bottlenecks business is facing, and what does business need from policy? So that's tees up perfectly the rest of our discussion, and is very much aligned with the questions that we put to our speakers who are coming up, which are, so despite the current headwinds, how can business continue to accelerate climate action in this year of 2025? And secondly, what are the shared priorities that leaders from business and government have to come together around to really create the conditions to accelerate the transformation that we all need? And it's not enough just for business to ask for policy asks individually. We really need to see these shared priorities around creating the conditions. And then lastly, how can we get more businesses to advocate for stronger climate policies in this current context? So with that, it's a great pleasure to pass to some of our business leaders in the room. So first, please, Rebecca Marmot, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Unilever. I believe you have a mic. Yeah, great, yes. Thank you. Over to you, please.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you to We Mean Business for organising this breakfast and galvanising action, as you always have done over recent years. So I just was going to take 2 or 3 minutes to talk very practically and try to answer some of these questions. So we all know that business is very critical to progressing on climate change. we've really taken that on board at Unilever, and we've moved very much from having long-term targets, which are still there, but really now focusing on what can we do in the short term. And by that, I mean, what can we do in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, this next year, to make sure that we're taking action and really practical steps to address the big sustainability issues that many of the businesses in this room are trying to tackle. For us, that's climate, nature, plastics and livelihoods. So we did a second climate transition action plan last year, which got voted through at our AGM with almost 98% support. And in that, we got very, very granular around the 10 levers that we need to activate as a business if we're going to make our long-term emissions reductions target by 2030 and net zero by 2039. And going through that exercise really made us understand what we need to do with our suppliers, what we need to do from an innovation perspective, who we need to partner with moving forward, what that looks like for our products and services, and so on. So one of the key things that we're doing this year at Davos is meeting with governments that are influential and critical in the markets where we're operating around the world, and urging them to come up with very progressive NDCs. So I know what we all want as businesses is to see governments come up with NDCs that will help us on our own climate transition progress and on journeys. So that means coming up with very tangible and defined policy environments so that we have much more certainty in the big markets where we're operating. And then, of course, the second reason for us to be here is working right across the value chain to look at the role that we all need to play. So in consumer goods, that's our suppliers, the retailers. So everybody along that value chain is on that same path towards decarbonisation. So when it comes to NDCs, I think there's obviously some really big macro level things that all of us would want to see governments committing to. So really trying to push a renewable energy infrastructure, removing subsidies on fossil fuels, etc. But also from a sector specific perspective, as Unilever and many other consumer goods companies have similar asks, is looking at, for example, how do we invest in renewable feedstocks, chemical feedstocks. We know when we look at our own climate impact that actually non-fossil fuel-based chemical feedstocks are a vital part of the journey for decarbonisation in products, for example, like detergents. We're really trying to push for good NDCs that protect forests. So how can we ensure that smallholder farmers are more able to get into the value chain when it comes to ensuring that we can source commodities from deforestation-free sources? Really pushing on regenerative agriculture. So how, again, you talked, I think, in the introduction about Yara, how can we move away from traditional farming and really help farmers and help in country the policy environment around pushing for things like regenerative agriculture. So in summary, I think where as businesses we can align what we need to do on our own climate transition action plans with governments in countries where we're all operating, and ask governments to help the business community. And so we're joined up, because where governments have the right policy environments, business will bring investment. And I think that that link is absolutely critical. So I know there's many progressive voices and businesses in this room, the same with governments. So yeah, from our perspective, very much about joining up our business aims and ambitions in decarbonisation with government NDCs to try to work together in a more effective but very practical and short-term way if we're going to see the progress that we need by, let's talk about it, Brazil, this autumn and moving forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you for your and Unilever's continued leadership, in particular on this policy advocacy, both domestically but also on the question of the national climate plans. Really bringing that message home to governments is so important. We're going to very quickly move to Ezgi Barsanas, who's the CSO of L'Oréal, because I know you have to leave shortly. So thanks for your patience, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me here. And really wonderful to be part of this fantastic community so early in the morning. We were just talking about with a few of you right before the session started that we are committed in more than one way for us to be coming here this early in the morning to be part of this conversation in this community. Really appreciate the invitation. As I was preparing for the session, I was thinking, how can business continue to accelerate climate action? And I thought, there could be three ways that maybe we can demonstrate by collaborating, by testing and learning, and then by demonstrating the solutions that can work, that can scale. And Rebecca mentioned a little bit about the decarbonization efforts, and maybe I can take a slightly different route and talk about how beyond investing in deep decarbonization inside our operations and across our value chain, what we're doing to build resilience and how we're investing in adaptation. One example that comes to mind is an industry collaboration that can help break down silos and barriers, that can accelerate innovation, that can catalyze action, is the One Planet Business for Biodiversity, OP2B initiative that is now housed within the WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's a cross-sectoral business coalition that brings together many businesses on biodiversity with a special focus on agriculture, a pretty competitive initiative that are looking to create positive biodiversity and social outcomes through public-private investments. And this year, what we're looking to do is at the European OP2B accelerator level, looking to align public and private sectors so that we can continue to invest in the transition. We can continue to find ways to make regenerative agriculture practices meaningful and invest in those adaptation efforts as well. The second piece is by learning and testing and learning, as I mentioned. In everything we do, we not only want to drive that green transition, but also find ways to drive a just transition as well by building resilience. And one big gap that we see around the world that we're looking to help find solutions is through our Climate Emergency Fund, where we are working to pioneer insurance models in India's urban informal economy, in a sector that has been previously overlooked by these policies, together with a local labor association. It's called Self-Employed Women's Association. Basically, what we're doing as L'Oreal is we're taking on the initial risk to create a proof of concept of how do you create these insurance models to build resilience, during moments of extreme weather events, and they can be replicated and scaled in other areas, other geographies, and other sectors as well. Again, it's a new model we're testing and we're learning, and the idea is to bring those learnings to market. And the last piece I want to highlight is I think what Secretary Tony mentioned is how can we continue to demonstrate that we're implementing these solutions, that we don't have all the answers, but we're asking the questions, we're looking for those partnerships, whether they're in the private sector or in the public sector or in the startup community. And I know there are some of you in the room here today as well. So you can count on us to continue to, I would say, look for those solutions and offer the world the reasons to believe. And I think that's what we're all aiming for as we're heading into COP30 as well, so that we can continue to demonstrate that there are interventions and solutions out there and partnerships that can really drive meaningful steps forward, especially within an enabling policy environment that can attract, again, innovation, but that can also enable that pre-competitive collaboration as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ezgi, the inspiring remarks, and thanks for bringing in the adaptation and the importance of the climate risk element for businesses. And now you're free to leave, so thanks for waiting. Next, great pleasure to pass to another of our core partners from the Women Business Coalition, so Leah Seligman, who's the Chief Change Catalyst and CEO of the B Team. So over to you, Leah, please.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? This was an early one, but it demonstrates all of our commitment. And this is a moment when we need that commitment. We need the courage and we need the excitement. I want to flip the first question on its head a little bit. We're talking about headwinds, but actually there's a lot of tailwinds, and it's important that that's what we're looking at. John, raise your hand over there. Okay, John Crate, CEO of Rocky Mountain Institute. I've had the pleasure of talking with him a lot the last couple of days, and he always gives me a surge of optimism. But some of the things that have been happening recently is clean tech costs have fallen by up to 80% over the last decade. In the last 2 years, battery storage has decreased in cost by 50%. The IRA in its first year in the U.S. created 150,000 jobs. And we're moving and grooving, and a transition is unstoppable. There's been a conversation often about what's going to make us go backwards or forwards. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to go backwards. We didn't go back to horses, even though there was a strong horse lobby when cars came. We're going to go forwards, and it's going to look different, and it's going to look exciting. And this is a room of people that are going to be part of it, and we're going to be part of it because we're going to bring others along. The things that we're looking at when I think about what's coming up in Brazil and the courage that's needed are, we need to think about the invisible things. I see Ellen over there, and I know Ellen is a leader in sustainability, and MasterCard has been a leader in sustainability, and she wakes up every day thinking about all of the small businesses that she enables. How do we look at those invisible incentives that are going to create the rails for everybody to move in this direction, so that it is not just about those that are volunteering and willing to kind of take the hard hits as we move in here, but we're making it easier for others to come along without having to make the choice, have big sustainability teams or drive things forward. Sorry guys, it's so early I have to look at notes, but later on I'll be grooving a little bit better. When I think about where we need to go and what we need to do, we as a collective, we need to be talking about the fact that this is happening. As businesses, we can't just be saying everybody's got to do everything all at once. What we need to be thinking about is, where is it material, where can we make a strong case, and where can we get our stakeholders excited? So let's look at our investors, let's talk about the shifting policy that's needed, the things that are going to speed us up. Those are the conversations that are going to be most credible with policymakers. Bring it to your own interest, and then bring it to the world's interest, and that's going to be really helpful. And finally, all of you are going to be in important rooms this week talking to important people. Bring your courage, step it up, because we can do this, we can drive things forward. We've got a real opportunity to transform, to create a better world. As someone who's from California, this summer I did not experience rolling blackouts, and I didn't experience rolling blackouts because another John fact, battery storage is up. And so let's go, let's drive, let's move things forward, and let's bring a little bit of energy into this, the good kind.
Great. Thank you so much, Leah, for your energy and your inspiring remarks as always. And I didn't think we'd be hearing about the horse lobby, but there we go. It's a great analogy. So at this point, we were going to have you break out and talk on your tables and get some closer, sort of intimate dialogue going. But in the interest of time, I think what we'll do is open up for anyone else who wants to take the floor before we then move to a wrap-up session from other speakers. So floor is open for anyone who wants to come in on these questions around what business needs to go faster. What are these kind of shared priorities between business and government? Yes, over there, please. Yeah.
Go, John.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's lovely to be in a room with such inspiring people. So I'm Toby Freeman from a little company called Beco. We're an SME in the UK. We're a member of Corporate Leaders Group UK. And actually came just to share some info. Sorry, it's early, so I've got my notes as well. So I came to share a collective of businesses called the Better Business Act Coalition. They're really interesting because they're proposing a shift from shareholder primacy and re-looking at the economic modelling to one that is instead stakeholder governed. So how they're doing this is looking at the 2006 Companies Act, and that's UK specific. I don't know how it would apply in other countries, in the EU states and around the world. But it's really interesting because this is a model that's been tried and tested through the B Corp movement, and it has shown that B Corps were more resilient through the COVID pandemic. They have had faster annual growth, feeding into how can we reimagine growth, which is one of the themes of this, why we're all here this week, and looking into and it's had high levels of staff community engagement. So it's a really interesting model into how you can really relook at the role which business plays in society at a very fundamental level, moving from looking just at what shareholder primacy. Of course, shareholders are very important. They would remain a very important stakeholder, one of the many stakeholders, and instead we look at how workers are treated, how local communities are treated, how the planet's treated. And of course, the great thing from an SME point of view, which is of course in the UK itself makes up half of the economy, is it's flexible enough that it can be applied to a level of business at every level. What's been really promising is the coalition has 3,000 members. The majority are SMEs, but we've also got some fantastic big names in there. So we've got Virgin, Innocent Drinks, Tony's Chocolonely, and all these businesses are absolutely thriving off the back of it. So I just wanted to share that as a potential way that we could look at really tackling all three of these in a kind of a broad way. Yeah, that's all from me. Sorry for the waffly message. First time public speaking, really. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Who would like to? Yeah, please. Here. We'll just take. Yeah, good. Mics around. Thank you. Just please, just 1 to 2 minutes so that we can get some more voices.
I'll be very quick. Good morning. So I'm Frédéric Roeder. I'm actually not from business. I'm working for the European Climate Foundation with Laurence Tubiana, who would have wanted to be here, but this is Davos, so at 7 a.m. you already have a conflict of agenda. We already had a few discussions yesterday also with Women Business. And of course, we're all in Davos, but also have our eyes, I think, on the phone, seeing what's happening in DC. And we thought we want this week to end not with the news from DC, with the US stepping back from the Paris Agreement and other news in that sense, but we wanted to end with a strong signal coming out of Davos that the whole story is not in DC, but actually that business stay on track. And we heard it also that obviously businesses going into the right direction do need the support from governments and in particular Europe. This was a discussion I think late last afternoon. We're very early morning, but we thought let's be ambitious and why not come together around a short statement that, all kinds of actors, but primarily businesses could sign on to, and which would then be basically the message coming out of Davos, maybe the headline at the end of this week. And we would love to work with you on this, and I hope, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I hope we can also count on you. I know that you already put out a great statement. But yeah, I think this would be something very concrete that we could do on number 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, with discussions yesterday, the importance of this, getting an urgent positive message from Davos really counts. So we'll follow up with that afterwards. So next, come over here, please. Thank you.
Hi, it's Sarah Schaefer. I work for a Swedish appliance maker called Electrolux. I have a question for those who are wrapping up, really, because the one element we haven't touched on is demand. So you would think for an appliance maker, for us to make the case for energy efficiency should be a no-brainer, given people are saving money, 30 rather than 40, the rest of it. But increasingly with the cost of living crisis, we don't see that shift in demand. And we really see a need also to change the narrative, because it's quite clear that while people are saying they want to close the green gap and the rest of it, we don't really see that translated in purchasing behavior. So yeah, my question to all of you is, when we work with government, how does that get incorporated? Because if anything, people increasingly, we find, think it's not really their responsibility to change behavior.
Great, thank you very much. And we've just got time for one more, and then we're going to move to our Faustine and our closing session. So, Kirsten, please.
Thank you very much, Kirsten Dunlop from Climate Kick. Just one extra build, perhaps, from my perspective. I also represent an organization that is not a large corporate. It's an organization working within the European and global context on climate innovation and the transformation of places. One of the untapped real possibilities that I would really wish to put forward as we go forward into the next 4 years is the relationship between cities, particularly, and regions, and industry in the construction of lead markets in the real economy. There are initiatives in Europe that are pushing very aggressively forward with hundreds of cities committed to decarbonise in short time frames. They constitute, when you start to put together what they need, the kinds of demand signal for the transition technologies, transition infrastructure, logistics, everything we need. There are broader city programs across the world, not necessarily thinking in a whole city transformation, but close to getting there. And I do see in the work that we do to broker the relationship in partnership with WBCSD and the B team, there is still a profound disconnect between implementing solutions in integrated ways in contexts that will constitute real economy transformation quickly, and a huge opportunity to do that. Because speaking as an organization working closely with hundreds of cities and regions, they are also not diverting from their course. They have no choice, notwithstanding the politics. So I would really wish to look at how quickly can we get some of these co-design, co-planning, co-implementation, and indeed one of the biggest challenges, and thank you very much, I don't know your name from Electrolux, but thank you so much for mentioning the question of reducing demand. One of the biggest problems is beginning to understand and model out the availability of materials, metals, resources that really challenge a lot of our individually calculated assumptions about transition. So the quicker there is an in-the-round set of discussions with industry, pre-competitive, pre-value chain, a whole value chain with cities in particular, we have a chance to speed up in these next 4 or 5 years. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kirsten. One quick one from John from RMI, and then we're going to move to Faustine, Linda, and Emmanuel. So please, John.
Yeah, maybe accepting the challenge for a little bit of optimism here this morning. When we look at the United States right now, 96% of all the energy that was added last year was clean, right? So this is everyone's concerned right now about what the next administration will mean. That, of course, was led by Texas, which is, as we all know, the Socialist Republic of the United States, when we think about the relative political leanings. We saw battery prices declining by 50% here over the last 2 years. As Leah indicated, that means that states like California, states like Texas, had no murmur even of challenges with supporting the grid this summer. That's amazing, right, when we think about where we're going to, and we're headed for a world right now where batteries will reduce in cost to about a third of where they are today over the next 5 years. The technology roadmaps are there. The production is coming online. We will see batteries that proliferate and change how we relate to electricity supply here quite dramatically, right? We'll see batteries in our refrigerators, in our stoves, in our modems and computers, so that we don't need a grid that's quite as reliable as the one that we have right now in order to enjoy all the benefits of energy. But that's kind of the US. I do want to say, when RMI looks at the numbers globally right now, 60% of the world is moving as fast or faster than the United States on the percentage share of adoption of clean energy. And that's something that we need to be aware of, that the Global South in particular is adopting and seeing much higher penetration rates much quicker than what we've seen in OECD countries. And so it's easy to be distracted by some of the politics of the moment and not recognize that this is fundamentally a technology change right now that we're going through, and that we are absolutely moving at exponential paces. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, John, for the optimism on technology. Without further ado, we'll move to some reflections, firstly from Faustine de la Salle, the CEO of Mission Possible Partnership. Faustine.
Thanks, Andrew. I won't repeat what John just brilliantly said. This is a green industrial revolution we're in. And the good news is that in the energy space, we've seen how public action combined with private action can really drive an industrial revolution. At the Mission Possible Partnership, we focus on the next stage of that green industrial revolution: heavy industry, heavy-duty transport, so sectors where we don't yet see the momentum that we see in the energy space. But there as well, we've seen business lead the way. And I want to celebrate the fact that the progress we've seen over the past 5 years in the industry space has really been driven by companies like yourselves, companies in the industry sectors that have decided to invest, despite the risks that this represented, in first demonstration plants and then first commercial plants to produce things like clean steel, clean glass, low carbon cement or sustainable aviation fuels, but also the leadership of companies that have bought those products at a premium. That voluntary demand that has been orchestrated by many organizations in this room has been critical to bring the first few projects to reality. And the reality of those first few projects then makes it tangible for policymakers. What we focus our energy on right now is finding clean industrial projects around the world that haven't reached final investment decision yet, because bankability is still an issue in the sectors in which we operate. But the very fact that we can point on a map to more than 700 projects right now across the globe, and that those projects are actually spread across US, Europe, but also the emerging economies. We find projects in Brazil, we find projects and a huge amount in India as well. The tangibility of that makes it much more easy from our perspective to then go to government to ask for the right policies to make those projects come to life, to put steel in the ground. And so we need continued leadership from business on the voluntary front, because that voluntary demand is really what is driving investment in industry sectors right now. But we need your help in showing that those projects can happen to policymakers, and then asking policymakers to help drive demand. Because to your point, what will or will not drive the industry transition in the coming years is really our ability to create desirability from a consumer perspective for new housing, for a built environment that is more sustainable, that enables people to thrive, for houses and for appliances that are actually much easier to use, that provide consumers and that are affordable. And while we bridge that affordability gap, we need governments to step in. But regulations and subsidies combined can really help us bridge that gap for the next few years until those solutions are affordable, and until that green industrial revolution, the next phase of the green industrial revolution, has the same momentum as the energy space right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Faustine, the green industrial revolution. Next we have Linda Freyner from Zurich, CSO of Zurich Insurance. Yeah, over there. I lost you for a moment.
Even though I'm dressed in green today, I think it's the dress code of CSOs in general. Look, a lot of things have been said already, which I find amazing that we're all so aligned. The good news is climate risk is not the top risk for insurers, no matter what media says. Climate risk is always going to be insurable. But I have to disappoint Maria in saying we have to work on adaptation and resilience. And this is, I think, where we need to also switch the narrative, and a few of those comments have come up today. We need to lower the risk, and actually always talking about what we see in the US. 40% of our revenue comes from the US. If you have a risk-based discussion, you can still have that discussion. So it's extremely important. The other piece, I think, is we have to also stop focusing on the US. There's so much going on in the rest of the world that we have to celebrate. We talked about renewable energy. The genie is out of the bottle. Raw economics is saying it's not going to go back in there. So that's something we have to focus on. The other piece that we haven't mentioned today, I think it's also very important for us as a sustainability community not to amplify the bad news, because media, social media, everyone is looking for bad news. So when US banks are leaving the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and having been through that alliance type of situation myself, the commitments will continue. They're not going to roll back on commitments, but the headlines will always be rolling back on commitments. So it's important for us to see beyond that and continue talking about what's actually happening. And the last good news I'm leaving you with, we are also partner of the Global Risk Report, which was released last week. And climate risk remains at the top 4 positions of long-term risks. We are still focusing on this. The risk perspective, again, is not going to go away. So I can say just continue with your hard work and we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for bringing that risk perspective and also the importance of cutting through the kind of negativity on the media side. So thanks for that. So our last speaker before we go to our closing remarks is Emmanuel Normand, who's VP for Sustainability at Saint-Gobain. Emmanuel, please.
Okay, difficult to conclude. And just on my side, maybe to reinforce that there's so many low-hanging fruits, that all what we're talking about is so much a driver of innovation, so much of driver of embarking all the teams. I can speak during hours of what we are doing at Saint-Gobain and how motivated we are all across the board to bring at scale low carbon plants, low carbon products that are not conflicting between competitiveness and sustainability. I want to reinforce one element among the low-hanging fruit, which is the built environment that has been already mentioned. Remembering that 40% of our energy consumption is related to the built environment. So it's a matter of sovereignty to reduce energy consumption, to decarbonize the built environment. It's also reinforced, I mean, the retrofitting or the new design of the building is bringing health and well-being. It's responding to basic needs of the population. And what I can perceive is that decarbonization and adaptation goes there again hand in hand. And you have places where somehow adaptation, risk mitigation is embarked within decarbonization. And you have other places, and I see that in the US, where actually it's adaptation to climate change, heat waves, flooding, and so on. That is embarking decarbonization. And there again, it's not conflicting. It's somehow feeding each other. And again, with lots of low-hanging fruit. Just my message around the built environment is still not high enough in the agenda. Progress has been made in the last 2 years with the buildings breakthrough, with the first forum on climate and buildings in Paris in March. But I mean, I take here Davos. I don't see it very much in the agenda. We're speaking again about 40% of the energy consumption that is related to the built environment.
Great. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that important perspective from the built environment. And now, so to bring us home, some closing remarks from 2 more of our core partners and board members of the Women Business Coalition. So with the interesting task of summing this up, first, Erin Kramer, the CEO of BSR, please.
Hi, great discussion, thank you. Let me just say a couple of things. We've been here before. So if you go back 10 years, if we were back in 2015, we were looking ahead to COP21. What did we see? We saw a very uncertain policy environment. We saw a business community that had not really engaged in promoting action on climate, the kinds of policies that were needed. We saw a lot of fragmentation amongst the entities that are working on things. We see the same things today. So I say this because there's a lot of focus on what's not going right. I agree with all the statements about what is. But even with the things that are not going in the direction that we want them to go in, we have been here before. And through close coordination, through pointing out the economic relevance of the energy transition, a lot of progress can be made. So I'm going to choose, on this new day dawning in the United States, I'm going to choose to be optimistic today that because we've done these things before, we can do them again. Second point I want to make, and a couple of people have referenced this, we are failing with our narrative. We are not breaking through to most of the public. Why is there weakness on public policy? Because policymakers follow the public. And if the public is uncertain, doesn't see themselves in the energy transition that we see, then the political action won't be there. So we've done a lot better about talking about the real economy. We need to put the real economy and the positive attributes that are being created so that it speaks to real people. If we talk about the real economy in a way that doesn't resonate with the public, we won't get where we need to go. So I think we're well aware of the headwinds. We know there is progress being made. We know that we've done some of these things before, and we have no choice. So it's great to be a part of this community, and, you know, it's game on.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And then last but by no means least, Peter Bakker, CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Peter.
Thank you, Andrew. So you get up at just before 6, you struggle up the hill to be here, and then all you can do is hope that you pick up a few sound bites that you think, wow, that was worse getting up. And this morning was absolutely worse, precisely that. We should not be negative. The things that I picked up is the world is a whole lot bigger than the US. So yeah, it's not good in one place, it's pretty okay in others. I picked up demand. We have a company here called Climeworks. Amazing technology, deep investments, but there is no demand for the carbon credits that they create. And we, the corporate world, have demand for those credits, so why aren't we buying them? What are we doing, people? Then the other thing I picked up is barriers. You know, to John's positivity, we know there are 5 solutions for which business cases exist. Renewable energy, methane emission, deforestation halting, electrification, and there's one more that now slips me. Obviously, energy efficiency. We need to drive in these transition plans those solutions. Every company must have a transition plan that says, what are we doing on those 5? We, the sustainability community, we must move away from outside-in views. Now, one of our partners, and so I shouldn't be too critical, together with the WEF, has published another report saying business is not doing enough. And we're all occasionally involved in speeches in which we say business is backtracking from its commitment. I mean, I have news for you. The days of commitments are over. The only days that we have left are the days of people making progress. We should hold people accountable. We should measure the progress. We should cheer them on if they're good. We should encourage them to do more if it's not yet good. And so the other soundbite I took away is, let's do a benchmark of transition plans, because the world is super simple. If we want to make this work, we need 2 things, solutions and accountability. And the thing that connects these 2 is a transition plan. So standardized transition plan, benchmark those, get companies to really gear up the ambition in that. The other thing, and that's more talking to myself and colleagues in my space, we need to stop talking about the long term. If you want to be depressed, go listen to Johan Rockström. I had another dose of him last night. And it's like, wow, man, that's like, we're done. But a conversation with business will become shorter term. It's not about what are we doing in 20 years. It's about what is happening in the next 5 years. How do we implement now? What are the barriers and how do we bring those to Anna? And the conversation will move from commitments and emission reductions to economic conversations. What are the investments you make? What are the profits you can generate with those? And a very new aspect, and what are the physical risks in your supply chain that you haven't understood yet? And if we, the sustainability community, can better link through economic language with business leaders, then the agenda will stay on. So don't give up. This is transitions like this are the most exciting places. And we're still in a beautiful tent, and Andrew is still cheering us on, so thanks all for coming out.
Thank you so much, Peter. And so just to finally say a big thank you to all our event partners you can see on the screen, including CDP. And thank you in particular to our co-host, the World Benchmarking Alliance. And thank you all, not only for showing up, but for all the inspiring remarks and for sticking it out to the end. So thank you again and goodbye.
Un plaisir. Un plaisir également. On est en contact. Pleasure. speaking with a colleague. Yes. Okay. I don't have the details on me. I'm going where I'm told. So a better person might be a better person for you to speak to. Callum, please. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But okay. I'm not sure to be
I think it's. Yeah, I have to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for your comments on the
It was super interesting.
But I also sit on the commission state of New York, which is charged with implementing our climate. And in New York State, we cannot meet our climate without urbanizing there. And we developed economic sense. We pull gas out of our home community. Probably makes economic sense. Given the